The Sodder Children. There are places where the dark feels ordinary. Then there are places where the dark seems to remember you. Tonight's story is based on the documented disappearance of the Sodder children in Fayetteville, West Virginia, on Christmas Eve, 1945. 5 children vanished after a house fire. Their parents spent decades believing that the official explanation was not the whole truth. It was Christmas Eve. The Sodder family home was crowded with children, presents, and the ordinary noise of a family preparing for Christmas morning. George and Jenny Sodder had 10 children. That night, several of them stayed upstairs while their parents and a few younger children remained downstairs. At around 1 in the morning, Jenny woke to a sound. SFX, a distant telephone ring. Then silence. She thought the telephone had rung. Moments later, she noticed smoke. Jenny. George. George, wake up. The house is on fire. George rushed outside. Flames were already climbing through the house. The family tried to get everyone out. Some escaped through windows and doors. But 5 children remained upstairs. Maurice. Martha. Louis. Jenny. And Betty. George. Get the ladder. We need the ladder. George ran to the place where the ladder was normally kept. Nothing. He searched again. Still nothing. The family had another ladder, but it was also missing. George tried to reach the upstairs windows another way. He attempted to start his work truck, hoping to drive it close to the house and use it as a platform. The truck would not start. He tried another vehicle. It would not start either. SFX, engine turning over. Failed ignition. Fire roaring louder. Neighbors rushed toward the burning house. Firefighters were called, but the response took time. By the time the fire was under control, the upper floor had been destroyed. The 5 children were gone. Investigators later concluded that the children had died in the fire. But George and Jenny were not convinced. They searched the ruins. They expected to find bones. They found almost nothing that convinced them their children had been inside when the fire destroyed the house. That was the beginning of a mystery that would follow the Sodder family for the rest of their lives. And then came the strangest details. A neighbor claimed she saw a man in a car near the house that night. Another person reported hearing the children after the fire had started. And George remembered something else. A few weeks before Christmas, someone had threatened him. The man had warned that his house would burn and his children would be destroyed. At the time, George dismissed the threat. After the fire, he could not forget it. But the most disturbing question was simple. If the 5 children had died upstairs, where were their remains? The Sodders did not accept the conclusion that their children had simply burned inside the house. They began asking questions. Questions that became harder to answer with every passing day. The first mystery concerned the ladder. Why had it disappeared? According to the family, the ladder had been kept outside the house. After the fire, it was discovered some distance away. It had not simply fallen. Someone appeared to have moved it. Then there was the question of the telephone. During the fire, the family could not use it. The line had reportedly been damaged. But Jenny remembered hearing the telephone shortly before she discovered the fire. Was that coincidence? Or had someone been inside the house? SFX, telephone ringing once. George also noticed that the family vehicles had mysteriously failed. That detail became one of the strangest parts of the story. Could a fire have caused both vehicles to fail at exactly the moment the family needed them? Perhaps. But George believed something more deliberate had happened. The Sodders began to suspect that the fire had not been an accident. They believed their children might have been taken. Then came the rumors. One witness claimed that a man had seen the children looking out from a car shortly after the fire. Another reported seeing a vehicle near the property. There were also reports that a woman had contacted the family and claimed she had seen the missing children. None of these reports produced a confirmed location. But they kept hope alive. And hope became an obsession. The family eventually put up a billboard. 5 photographs stared down from the roadside. 5 children who had disappeared on Christmas Eve. The message asked the public for information. The Sodders offered a reward. Years passed. Then decades. But there was another disturbing detail. The fire had destroyed almost everything. Yet the family believed that the remains of 5 bodies should have been discoverable. The lack of remains became central to their suspicion. Imagine standing where your childhood home once stood. The walls are gone. The roof is gone. Your children's beds are gone. Their clothes are gone. Their Christmas presents are gone. And you are searching through ash for something that proves they were there. George and Jenny never stopped searching. SFX, wind blowing softly. In the years after the fire, the family received strange information. Some claims were clearly unreliable. Others were impossible to verify. But one thing kept the mystery alive. There was no definitive explanation for what had happened to the 5 children. The official investigation said the fire had killed them. The parents believed otherwise. And then, many years later, something happened that made the mystery even darker. A letter arrived. It was addressed to the family. Inside was a photograph. The photograph appeared to show one of the missing boys as an adult. On the back was a handwritten message. A message that suggested the boy was still alive. SFX, paper unfolding. For George and Jenny, it was like opening a door that had been locked for years. Was their son alive? Had someone taken the children? Was the photograph genuine? Or was someone deliberately torturing a grieving family? No one could prove the answer. And the questions continued. The photograph became one of the most haunting pieces of the Sodder mystery. It showed a man who appeared older than the missing child. On the back was a message claiming that the man was Louis Sodder. The family desperately wanted to believe it. But wanting something to be true does not make it true. The photograph was never conclusively authenticated. There was no confirmed identification. No verified location. No reliable evidence establishing where Louis had been. Yet the image was enough to reopen an old wound. George and Jenny had already spent years wondering whether their children had survived. Now they had something they could hold in their hands. A face. A possibility. A question. Who had sent it? And why? SFX, low atmospheric drone. The mystery became larger than the fire itself. There were theories of kidnapping. There were theories involving organized crime. There were theories that the children had died in the fire and that the lack of remains had another explanation. There were theories that investigators had simply made mistakes. And there were theories that the family had misunderstood what happened during a chaotic Christmas Eve. But none of those theories completely explained every strange detail. That is what makes the story so unsettling. It is not one unexplained event. It is a chain of unanswered questions. Why were the ladders missing? Why did the vehicles fail? Why were there reports of suspicious people and vehicles? Why were there conflicting accounts of what happened? Why did the family never find convincing remains? And why did someone later send a photograph claiming one of the children was alive? Each question creates another. And another. Until the entire story feels like a hallway with doors on both sides. You open one. There is another door behind it. SFX, slow footsteps. George and Jenny continued looking for their children. They kept the case alive. They kept photographs. They kept the billboard. They kept asking questions. But the years passed. Children grew older. The world changed. And the people who remembered that Christmas Eve began to disappear. Witnesses died. Memories faded. Documents became harder to find. And eventually, the family had to live with something perhaps worse than knowing. They had to live with not knowing. Imagine losing someone. Now imagine being told they are dead. Then imagine spending the rest of your life wondering whether they might actually be alive somewhere. That kind of uncertainty never ends. There is no funeral that closes the story. No grave to visit. No final photograph. Only questions. SFX, clock ticking. George Sauter died still believing that his children had not simply disappeared in a house fire. Jenny continued searching after his death. The family continued to preserve the mystery. And even after many decades, the story remained one of America's strangest unsolved disappearances. But there is one final question. Perhaps the most frightening one. What if the parents were right? What if the 5 children really did survive the fire? And if they survived? Who took them? The Sauter case has never received the ending a family would want. There is no confirmed discovery of the 5 missing children. No definitive proof that they were kidnapped. And no universally accepted explanation that answers every strange detail surrounding the fire. That is why the story continues to haunt people. Not because we know what happened. But because we don't. SFX, fire crackling quietly. Perhaps the official explanation was correct. Perhaps the children died that Christmas Eve, and the destruction of the house made the investigation extraordinarily difficult. Perhaps the family's grief caused them to search for another answer. That possibility cannot simply be dismissed. But the alternative is darker. If the children survived, then somewhere, someone knew what happened. Someone may have known where they went. Someone may have known why they disappeared. And perhaps that person took the secret to the grave. For decades, the Sauter family kept searching. 5 children. 5 faces. 1 Christmas night. 1 burned house. And thousands of unanswered questions. The case reminds us that sometimes the most terrifying stories do not involve ghosts. They involve ordinary people. A family. A home. A holiday. And something that happens in the middle of the night that changes everything forever. SFX, telephone ringing. 1 ring. Then silence. And somewhere in the darkness, 5 children were never seen again. SFX, long silence. This was the story of the Sauter children. A documented American mystery that remains surrounded by unanswered questions. And if you were standing outside that burning house in 1945, watching the flames consume everything, Would you have believed the children were still inside? Or would you have noticed the things that did not make sense? The missing ladder. The failed vehicles. The strange witnesses. The unanswered threats. And the photograph that appeared years later. Maybe the truth is hidden somewhere in those details. Or maybe the truth disappeared with the children. SFX, wind. Either way, Christmas Eve would never be the same for the Sodder family. And perhaps that is the most frightening part of this story. Not knowing. Not being able to say goodbye. And never knowing whether the people you lost were truly lost at all. SFX, telephone ring once. Cut to silence. End.